You dare?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. My name is Cindy Hill, and I oversee the Student Success Center here at ISU. It's my pleasure once again to welcome you to our Great Ideas in Teaching lecture series. We've asked some of our best teachers on campus to share some of their thoughts and insights with us regarding teaching. So before we get started with today's presentation, I thought I would share with you a quick overview of what is still yet to come. Our next presentation is in 2 weeks. Dr. Andy Holland, once again in this room. On November 2nd, we have a panel with representatives from every college across campus, 7 representatives who will be here to talk to us about thoughts on teaching from our master teachers. And then on November 16th, Catherine Black from the Department of Biological Sciences will come and share with us some of her insights right before our Thanksgiving break. So there's also one more lecture that I wanted to make sure that you are all aware of. Each fall, the Honor Society of Phi Kappa Phi sponsors a fall lecture, and this year's fall lecture will be presented by Dr. Donna Liebecker. She was our speaker 2 weeks ago in our Great Ideas for Teaching lecture. But her presentation is Sustainability in Ireland and the U.S., and it will be held in the Wood River Room on October 17th at 7 o'clock. So I hope I will see you in the very near future at many of these presentations. So now it is my honor to introduce to you Dr. Karen Appleby. Dr. Appleby is a professor in sports science and physical education department at Idaho State University, where she teaches classes in sports psychology, research and writing, senior capstone, and marketing and management in sport. She has conducted research in the areas of mentoring in higher education, women's experience in sport and physical activity, and life quality issues in the master's athlete population. She's also published articles focused on the scholarship of teaching and learning, specifically in the areas of academic advising, enhancing student professional development, and syllabus design. In 2009, Dr. Appleby was named the Outstanding Collegiate Educator by the Idaho Association for Health, Physical Education, Recreation, and Dance. And in 2010, was named the Idaho State University Distinguished Teacher. Dr. Appleby loves teaching at ISU and living in Pocatello, where she can cross-country ski, road bike, and run with her husband and dogs in the beautiful Idaho mountains. Please help me welcome Dr. Karen Appleby.
So the first challenge in teaching, as we all know, is making sure that your technology works seamlessly. And being able to do that in front of a group of people can sometimes be challenging. Much like Donna did, let's see. Green it is. Much like Donna did, can everybody hear me? Okay. Last week, I'm going to use the microphone, and I'm also going to attempt to use this clicker at the same time. So at some point, I might move just back to the podium. But it is my honor to be here with you this morning, and I'm excited to see everybody here and everybody at our distance locations. It's always a fun opportunity for me to get to talk about teaching. And one of the things that, before I start, as Dr. Hill mentioned, my background is in sports psychology, and a lot of what I do in sports psychology is very relevant to teaching. One of those things is helping groups and teams work effectively together. And so I've developed a strategy, and we'll talk to you today about a strategy for putting together group work in a way that it encourages participation and equitable workload across the group members, which can be a challenge, a way to grade group members both at the group level and the individual level, and also a strategy for developing group work that's enjoyable for you, the group members, and also for you, because if you've ever done a group project in class, you know there can be some challenges there. Sometimes it's not as fun as you anticipate that it's going to be. So hopefully today this strategy will help you think about some of those things. I also know that I am in the presence of many great teachers, and you all have great strategies for similar types of group work. So I hope at the end of the presentation that I'm going to give today that you all will be willing to share some of your ideas with me, because I'd love to know what you all do too. So, we all know that group work can be very effective for students. And there's lots of positive things that come with working in groups, not only as a student, but as a professional. And there are lots of cliches out there about the positive benefits of group work. For example, we hope that group work, or we think that group work makes our work a little bit easier, okay? Because oftentimes, two heads are better than one, more hands make the load, make for lighter work. And then we also assume that in group work, the more the merrier, right? The more people involved, the more enjoyable the experience. But if you've ever been part of a team or a group that doesn't work very well together, you also know that what often happens is that too many hands can make a load heavier. Because of coordination issues or motivation issues, too many people can sometimes make a task a little more complex than it needs to be. Sometimes one head can get the job done faster than lots of people providing input. Okay? And we all know that the more, well, sometimes the less merry our situation can be. So thinking about that, and I'm going to assume that you all do some type of group work in your classes, or you're thinking about doing group work in your classes. And you do that because you want your students to be able to function in a group kind of environment in their professional lives. Because we all are preparing students who are going to have to work with other people when they get out into the professional world. So, since I'm assuming that you all do some type of group work in your classes, I'm just curious why you assign group work. Why do you assign group work in your classes? What's the benefit?
So they can learn from each other.
Okay, so they can learn from each other. They can work together and learn from each other. The content knowledge you can enrich in the opportunity for them to learn the content because they can work together. Okay, learn from each other. It models the professional environment that they're going to be engaged in when they leave. They have to have these skills, right? Other reasons?
I love the energy when they're engaged.
Yes. Group work is a great opportunity for active learning, flipped classrooms, those types of things, for actually getting students doing work together. So there's some synergy and some energy. they can explore a more challenging problem. So as opposed to just one person doing it on their own, because we have more people learning from each other, the problem that we present to them can be a bit more challenging and they can work through it together. One more reason we do group work. Right, so we can engage all students. We all have the students who are excited about, sharing everything in class, sometimes too much in class. And then we have the students who are not as comfortable doing that. So group work settings, if done properly, can help those students really find their voice in the classroom. Good. There are lots of reasons we do group work. That picture is fuzzy on the outline because it's my dream of how I want, it's not very big, but how I want all my students to look like when they're engaged in group work. Happy, content, they like each other. So we all know that group work is important for students because it helps them develop professional skills. Working in a team structure, making decisions, complex application, problem solving, planning, organizing, and prioritizing work. And one thing that I think is really important about group work is the opportunity to both provide and receive feedback from your peers. And that's going to come up a little bit later. That's a tough thing to do. Students are very comfortable getting feedback from teachers, but oftentimes less comfortable getting feedback from their peers, which is what's going to happen with their colleagues in their work life, and even less comfortable giving feedback to their peers. So it's an opportunity in a safe environment to practice that. We also know that group work is important because of the development of interpersonal skills, and this list is very, very long of the interpersonal skills that students can develop. Communication skills, cooperation skills, delegation skills, those types of things. And in fact, the National Association for Colleges and Employers, which does employment surveys almost every year about what employers are looking for in new employees, has suggested that the top 4 things that employers are looking for in new employees is the ability to work in a team setting, proficiency in problem solving and decision making, adept organizational abilities, and the ability to skillfully communicate, all of which we can promote in group projects. And a whole bunch of other things too. So, before I get into strategies, hence the title of this presentation, we also know that groups can have catastrophic failure sometimes. And this is the dreaded social loafing. My social psychologist friends have researched in depth what happens to people when they get into groups, small groups, medium-sized groups, larger groups. And what happens is when we get into larger groups, we oftentimes engage in a process called social loafing. And that is when we do not give 100% of our individual output because we assume that, either other people will pick up that portion of the responsibility, or it could be a coordination issue. Sometimes it's just difficult to coordinate when we're trying to work with other people. This meme right here makes me laugh. I talk about group work a lot in my classes, so when my students sent this to me, the definition of the group project: time to relax while you watch someone else who cares do all of the work. So that's what we don't want to happen. And everybody in here probably has started a class at the beginning of the semester. You've gone through the syllabus, talked about all of the different types of things, projects you're going to do in class. You've talked about your group project. And you see one of 2 reactions generally. Generally, you see the reaction like, sweet, group project, very good, okay? Or you see the, a group project, great. Okay, there's usually 1 or 2 reactions based on how people have commonly worked in groups before. And my students anecdotally also tell me that their challenges with group work when they don't want to do it is they know that in some ways their peers don't oftentimes meet up to the standards and expectations that they have for themselves in the class. Okay? They might not like the people in their small group. Now, that happens in the workplace sometimes, or we might not know the people in our small group, but we still have to learn how to work effectively in those settings. It's too hard to coordinate our busy schedules. We all have students who are going to school full-time, working full-time, have full-time family responsibilities, those types of things, and it's tough when you have a group of 3, 4, 5 people trying to coordinate schedules. I get stuck doing all of the work. That's never a good situation. And then here, there's no accountability. We all get the same grade. So today we're going to talk about some strategies to make sure, or at least maybe not to eliminate, but to alleviate some of these issues that come up in group work. So the 5 strategies that I'm going to talk today about in effective group work. First, to create a meaningful assignment. Second, to strategically assign your groups. Third, to clarify your roles and responsibilities. Fourth, to scaffold your assignments. And then fifth, to allow for student input and feedback, especially when it comes to grading. And I'm going to present these 5 strategies in the context of a group project that I do in my Introduction to Sport Marketing class that I teach in our department. This is an upper division class for sport management majors. And in this class, their major assignment is that they have to develop a marketing plan for an ISU athletic event. So I work with the ISU athletic department for that experience. They have to implement the plan. So not only do they have to create the plan, they actually have to implement the plan. They have to run an athletic event. They have to create a professional portfolio based on this plan. They have to present their plan in a professional context in front of their colleagues and their peers, in front of faculty members, and in front of some of the administrators in the ISU athletic department who are professionals in this field. And then they also have to reflect on this experience. So when I do workshops on teaching, what I like to do is give you things to take away. So if anybody would like this PowerPoint afterwards, please let me know, because there are some documents in here. Or if you want some of the documents that I'm talking about, I would be happy to share those with you so you could change them up and use them for your group projects if you want to. So I'm going to show you some of those that I used. So the first step, and I think this is the most important step in creating the foundation of effective group work, is to create an assignment that's meaningful for your students. So, if possible, create an assignment that has novel application to a real-life setting. This might not be possible in some of your classes, but if at all possible, think about a meaningful assignment for them. What's going to give them the most meaning when they have finished this assignment? A couple weeks ago, the College of Arts and Letters put on a service learning seminar. And I think many of you were at the service learning seminar. And even though a lot of the presenters didn't talk about group work, they talked about some really cool ideas about how to implement applied real-life assignments in their classes. So this could be a service learning opportunity as well for you to implement. The second part of creating a meaningful assignment is to show your students that this can actually be a professional opportunity for them. While they're not getting paid to put on this event, if done well, create an assignment that they could actually put as a line on their resume. Maybe it's a volunteer activity that they engaged in, or it's something that they could talk about in a professional interview. So give me an example of when you've worked effectively in a group. If that was a question a student got in an interview, I want them to be able to recall their Introduction to Sport Marketing class and say, well, actually, I have a really good example of how in a class setting, in a group setting, we were able to market, promote, and actually put on a successful ISU athletic event. And then the other thing to do with them is to specify what are the professional outcomes they're going to get from doing this. And you link that back to your profession. And I have a feeling that a lot of our professions have very similar professional development outcomes and needs. So what I do in class to specify professional outcomes is when I introduce this topic, I actually put up a PowerPoint slide and do kind of a little activity with them of what do you think are the skills of effective sport managers? I get their input on what do you think a sport manager has to do in the field. And then I present to them, based on the literature, what people say. In order to be effective in this field, you need to be able to communicate and solve problems, oversee a budget, successfully engage in program planning, understand organizational issues, those types of things. And then what I ask them to do is review what the activities in this assignment are, and I ask them to think about how those activities align directly with some of those professional development skills. So we won't go through that process now, but it's a great way of, instead of me telling them, hey, this is really good for you, they have the opportunity to say, oh, okay, so Dr. Appleby's having us do this thing, this activity, and these are the things I'm going to have to do when I get out into the field. Oh, I see. So that's why we're doing this event. That's why I have to give this presentation. That's why we actually have to implement this. And so what that does, I don't like the word buy-in, but I think it provides motivation for the students because the assignment becomes meaningful to them in some professional capacity. So that's the first step there. Any questions or thoughts on that? And I certainly don't want to exclude our distance sites. We have a couple folks there. Do you all have any questions or comments so far? How does it fit into the curriculum? The actual activity that we're doing, we're going to talk about that next. We're going to talk about how to fit that into the curriculum of the class. So thank you for that question. So step number 2 is strategically assign groups. So I've done the group assignment through letting students choose their groups before, which isn't always bad. Okay, I think there are some times when choosing your groups is appropriate, but certainly students don't make the most strategic choices when they pick their groups. Plus, when you go out into the work world, do you get to pick your groups? Commonly, you don't. It's an opportunity to kind of mix up group members who are more outgoing and less outgoing, match skills, those types of things. I strategically assign the groups early in the semester. So here's the thing. Oftentimes, I don't know many of the students who are in the class. So I'm not necessarily assigning based on what I think or I know student skills are. It is really just random assignment, okay, to see how this will turn out. You should also consider number of people in groups. Some of the best working groups are between 3 and 5 people. Research shows that more than 6 people does get a little complex when it comes to coordinating schedules and those types of things. So I think consider the number of people you need in the group, have that set up, be able to be a little bit flexible. You're going to have some smaller groups, some larger groups. Assign groups early in the semester. And so this concept of proximity in the sports psychology literature, in order for teams to work effectively, they literally need to be close to each other. They need to have lots of opportunities to interact with each other. Now, on a sports team, that happens naturally. We practice every day after school or we travel. But in classes, that doesn't happen. And so in terms of the timeline in class, you want to assign these groups. I assign groups on the second day of class. And before we even get into this group work, I have them do some small little discussion type activities to get them used to each other, get them to know each other, that kind of stuff. So just kind of promote that closeness, that physical closeness. They don't have to be friends, but they just have to get to know each other. Okay. And then actually role clarity and acceptance, something I'm going to talk about with step number 3, is in order for groups and teams to function effectively, everybody on the team needs to know their role. And the second part of that is everybody needs to accept their role. That's a tough thing sometimes. Okay. So, in order to help students know their role in this group project, and this is a pretty big group project, and it starts the second day of class, and it ends during finals week. So it's an entire semester-long activity. If I didn't help them think about what the roles and responsibilities of getting this task done were, or if I didn't help them think about in what ways they were going to contribute to the activity, they would be lost somewhere. Okay, so you kind of have to help facilitate that coordination. So, a couple things that I do with roles. The first thing, after I've assigned the groups, and after I get them into their groups, the second week of class, and they know what the assignment is, I pass out to each group something called a group work task sheet. So let's see if this comes up very well. You may or may not be able to see this. This is one of the documents I'd be happy to share with you if you'd like it. So on the group work task sheet, basically what I've done is I've broken the entire assignment, the entire project out into an outline of activities and duties, of things that need to be done in order for the project to be successful. And at this point, I ask all of the group members to put their name on each of the activities that they are willing to be responsible for. They do this in their groups so they can negotiate, and here is where you really start a cool group process. You can see a cool group process going on because they start to say, well, you know what, I'm really good at putting PowerPoints together, so I want to be the person who gets the PowerPoints from everybody and puts it together. I really love writing, so I'd like to be the person to do the draft of the portfolio. Or, gosh, I'm an intern in marketing right now, and maybe I'm the one who could go out and work on sponsorships. Whatever it is, they start to identify what their strengths are within the group. And they normally wouldn't do that because our students really don't like to brag on themselves, right? But when you put it in the context of, as a group, you have to get these things done, who's going to do these things, it makes it easier for them to have that discussion. And so, in terms of how I put this into the curriculum, these are the assignments that they do throughout the entire semester on the project. And those are outlined in the syllabus. I won't get you the dates of those. But I also tell them that I know that this might change throughout the semester. So they turn this into me. I look over it. I make sure that one person hasn't signed their name on the entire document, okay? That there is equitable workload across the group. And then I tell them if it changes, that's okay. They just need to update it and return it in so I know what's going on throughout the process. So this is really helpful because A, it gives them an idea of what their roles are. They've accepted their roles, but B, they also are starting to kind of get this mental template of what's required in the class.
So I'm in Meridian, and I just wanted to share a process that I used to do this that worked really well. You know, there's this icebreaker where you have people draw a circle and then say what percent of them, like, kind of describe themselves. You know, like, so for me, like, I'm 50% of me is a dietitian and 50% of me is a teacher. Like, so you kind of talk about your roles in life. Mm-hmm. So I did that icebreaker. And then I did a short discussion about the roles in a marketing team. And then I had them repeated. And so in terms of the roles of marketing, talk about what percent of them they were, you know, were their strengths. So then I had them come up with teams where they were pairing themselves based on trying to make sure they had somebody who was strong with the various strengths in marketing. So there was one that was the design and the PowerPoint. Another was more the strategic thinking. One was the presentation skills. And so I just kind of went through different key components of a marketing team. And it did work very well.
Tell me your name.
Barbara Gordon.
Barb, did you say? Gordon?
Yes, Barb, yep.
Barb, nice to meet you, and thank you for that. I would really love to talk to you.
Okay.
Because I think in terms of group creation, that could be another way of sort of a strengths-based grouping of students instead of just a random assignment. And it's also another way to get them thinking about what are the professional development skills that I'm learning here. So that's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the group work task sheet starts at the very beginning of the project, and then throughout the semester, I have broken the entire portfolio up into smaller segments. And we're going to talk about scaffolding the assignment here in just a second. But they're called mini projects. And so I've broken the portfolio up into 4 different segments. One's related to marketing techniques, one's SWOT analysis, those types of things. And then each student is required to be a lead author on a mini project. So every student has the opportunity not just to participate, but also the opportunity, sort of the requirement, to also serve as a leader in these mini projects. So that's also outlined in the group work task sheet. So you can see mini project A, B, C, and D. I have a lead person on those, and I know who's going to be asking me questions. Uh-oh. So the last thing about clarifying roles and responsibility is the in-class workday. So for all of these assignments, I also provide students the opportunity to kind of flip the classroom. We talk about what a SWOT analysis is, and then in the next class period, I have them work in their groups to create their SWOT analysis. And if you've ever done in-class workdays, you know those need structure as well. Because sometimes you can get students together, and sometimes they do great. Sometimes you get students together, and they're just not very productive in that class period. So I've also come up with a strategy for that, and I have a number of in-class work days, and each of them, each person during these in-class work days has to fill out an in-class workday participation sheet. So this participation sheet, each student gets this at the beginning of the class. They get into their groups, put their name on it. They list 3 group goals they have for that day. Okay, what are the things that you really want to get done that day? What are their individual responsibilities in completing those goals? Okay. And then at the end, did you complete the goals? If yes, how did you do this? If no, briefly describe why you weren't able to get this done. And then if you chose no, tell me what you're going to do before the next class period to complete all of this work. And then the key issue here is that all the group members sign off on each other's work. So they're accountable for each other. So in that way, they know exactly what they want to get done, how they're going to do it, if they've done it, and then future planning what they need to do if they didn't get all of the work done in that class period. So step number 4 is scaffolding assignments. And so you probably have already gotten an idea of how that scaffolding happens. When you scaffold assignments, you give students opportunities to turn in rough drafts, get feedback, improve upon performance, those types of things. And so that's the group process. I mean, we want groups work best when they get feedback along the way. So in terms of how I put this into my curriculum, you give the big overview of the assignment. You break up the semester into mini projects, chunk up the assignments into mini projects. They turn those in, get feedback. I give it back to them. And then on the final, I'm looking at what feedback I gave to them and making sure that they took it. They're also required to give a midterm presentation, so just kind of a check-in. Do a check-in of where you are at midterm. You only have 6 more weeks to complete this project, so how are you doing? The midterm presentation is actually a professional presentation. It's like a 5 to 7 minute presentation, and they get feedback from me on the presentation. They get feedback from the group members in the class, the other classmates, and they also get feedback from the administrators in the athletic department who I'm working with on this assignment. And we've talked about the in-class work days. So one of the things I want to talk about just real quickly is with mini projects and rough draft assignments, one of the things I like to do with grading with mini projects is I like to do a completion grade. So as long as all of the assignments and the required pieces are there, they get points for that. I always tell them, though, I do take points off for grammar, mechanics, those types of things that you should be paying attention to with every professional draft. But think about it being more of a low-stakes assignment for them to get feedback. High stakes is the final one. So we've talked about those mini projects and the completion grades. And then the last part is allowing for student input and feedback. And here, this is something I still am creating ideas for getting student input and feedback on grading. First, in order to grade clearly, the students have to know what you're grading them on. So whether you use a rubric, whether you use an outline, however you let them know they're being graded, make sure it's clear to them. Give them ample opportunity to ask questions. But I do also give my students the opportunity to evaluate at the very end of the process each other and themselves. So once the entire project is completed, they've turned in their portfolio, they've given their final presentation, they fill out something called the teamwork rating sheet. It's a very simple sheet that I created that asks 10 questions on their team members' ability or willingness to engage in behaviors that ensure the overall success of the project. I asked them to rate the other team members, and I also asked them to rate themselves. And students are pretty harsh on themselves. I don't share these with the other team members, so you know. This is just for me. But what I do is I simply take the numerical outcome of each individual, and then I do a mean. And this is worth about 5% of their grade. So again, it's low stakes, but it is a portion of their grade. Now, sometimes there are egregious outliers. And then I have to have a conversation with the student, and we work that out. But this has been a really, and I present this to them at the beginning of class. And I tell them, listen, at the end of class, you're going to be rating each other on these types of things. So when you're in your meetings and your groups, be thinking about doing some of these, engaging in some of these behaviors. Okay? So the teamwork rating sheet has been met with interest with students, I would say. Wouldn't say necessarily resistance, but I think because I haven't sprung it on them as a surprise at the end, oh, hey, by the way, you're going to rate each other, I've let them know throughout the process this is something that's going to happen. And then at the end, I also, about 15% of their final grade is an individual reflection and a description of the major tasks that they engaged in for the overall project. So this is really an opportunity for students to brag on themselves. What did you do? There are clearly things in a group project that we don't know happens. You know, somebody's computer blew up, and that was the only version of the PowerPoint they had, and it was 2 hours before the final presentation, and somebody stepped up and recreated the whole thing. I wouldn't know that unless I gave them the opportunity to reflect. So not only do they reflect on the project overall, what skills they were able to gain, so I give them an outline for that. But what did you do in terms of professional skills, professional behaviors? What did you do that really led to the success of this overall project? So, just some general strategies, and then I'd like to open it up to hear what you all think or some other ideas. As a recap, when you do group projects in class, make it a meaningful project. It's meaningful to you, and you know why you're doing it, but a lot of times students don't. So make it meaningful to them. Why are you doing this? It will help increase their motivation to perform well. Create accountability among group members. Any way you can, make sure that you're creating role clarity so everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing. Okay. And also creating role acceptance. We've all been on a group where you kind of have to do something that you've never done before, or you don't love doing it. But you can see that as an opportunity for growth, right? And so that's what I help my students think about. So create accountability, create clear outcomes and expectations, guide the instruction and provide feedback across the planning process. There's nothing worse than giving students an entire semester to work on a project, and you're so excited for these great presentations, and then they're not as great as you want them to be. And one of the reasons I put all of this together is I realized that was on me, is people don't naturally know how to work well in groups. And so it's our responsibility as faculty members and instructors to help them learn some of those skills. And then give students a voice in grading as much as you're comfortable with. I'm going to suggest that it is not the entire grade, but that it's at least a small portion for them to reflect on and give each other some feedback. So here are some references for you, and questions, comments, thoughts, ideas. One project a semester, along with other assignments. They have paper, individual assignments. But the project starts, like I said, the second week of class, and then every other week, a mini project is due. So a portion of the assignment, we cover the content of the mini project, and then the next day in class, they get a work day where they can work on that portion of the portfolio, and then the following week, they turn in the rough draft of that portion, and then they start on the next project. And timing's a little bit tricky because with the schedule, because they're actually doing an event, wouldn't it be nice if everything we wanted our students to do occurred on April 29th? And then they could work on this project throughout the semester, do the thing on April 29th, and then reflect on it and turn everything in. But, some of the athletic events are at the beginning of March. Some of them are at the end of April, so you kind of have to work the timing around that. And then midterm presentation, and then final presentation during finals week, and then their portfolio. We do, yeah. For the midterm presentation, obviously they're presenting to their classmates, myself, oftentimes another faculty member in the department who has a marketing background, and then also administrators from the athletic department who are helping oversee this project as well. So they get feedback from lots of different angles. Yes?
Thank you very much for the presentation.
Oh, you're welcome.
It was really useful. Thank you. So I teach a 4,000 level course here where I have 5 problem sets. And I have those done in groups. At least that's what I've traditionally done the last, 4 or 5 years at least. One of the challenges I've run into is that, the one issue of the self-assigned groups, it does actually work fairly well in my realm for the most part, but this year, I'm running into an issue after the first problem set. It's about attendance and things like that. So, I was curious about your thoughts on going to, like, for the second round to assigned groups, maybe the third problem set have individual responses. It's a class of about 20 students, so I feel like that, for a larger class, I might be mixing it up a lot. But for this class, I was just curious about your thoughts on making each one either individual or assigned or self-assigned and kind of what your ideas were.
Yeah, I have some thoughts on that. I'm sure others do as well. One of the things that's interesting is no matter how standardized you make something, every class has its own personality. And so sometimes a lot of this works seamlessly, and sometimes it's kind of like a fight throughout the semester, and you have to be willing to be flexible. My suggestion, if you're haven't had that in the past, but you're having it, it's probably just the dynamics going on in the class. I would definitely mix it up. I would maybe with the next set do exactly what you said, do a random assignment, then do an individual, then go back to a chosen group, kind of keep them on their toes a little bit. You might find that they work better in different group structures. So does anybody else have thoughts on that?
Sometimes, especially with the graduate classes, I've utilized Zoom. So if people weren't able to get to the classroom, they could, through Zoom, have come in through different people's laptops. So they were still contributing.
That is a great suggestion. And, obviously I should have given you a little bit of the demographics on this class. This is a very traditional face-to-face undergraduate class. So we meet every Tuesday and every Thursday. The students, there's high expectation for attendance. Generally, it's not an issue. However, I could see, say a student is gone, but the mini projects, it's really group dependent. So if they can't be there for a mini project, maybe they're traveling, to be able to offer that Zoom capability or something like that in a graduate class that you're teaching online or in some other way. Yeah, utilizing some of those technologies would be very helpful. So my apologies. I should have laid out the demographics. It's a very traditional class in terms of meeting times and those types of things. So, what percent of the grade? You know what? I'm going to have to go back to my syllabus and look to see what exactly the percentage of the grade. But it's a large percentage, so it's trying to think. Let's see, they have a paper. They have other assignment quizzes. So it's probably about 60% of their grade. So it's a very large portion of their grade. But they also have those individual grades, and the 60% also encompasses the mini projects. So the projects that are, it's not all or nothing when it comes to the portfolio and the final presentation. They have the mini projects, they have the midterm presentation, and all of that sums up to that portion. But I could certainly I could send you my syllabus if you want to see it, how it's laid out. Other questions? Thoughts? Any novel, I know there's lots of novel things that you all do. Any other thoughts on how to get students to engage in group work more effectively?
We're just going to ask what your thoughts were on the lower level classes versus the higher level classes, and how students are committed to this type of work.
Yeah, that's another great question. So this is an upper division class. So we've got juniors and seniors in this class, and they are feeling the stress of thinking about, oh my, I need to get a job when I graduate. So these professional skills are very relevant, or becoming very relevant to them. For a 100 or a 200 level class, I'm not saying that those students aren't thinking about the development of professional skills. That's not what I'm suggesting. But I think this would be an inappropriate assignment for them. Because it's high level work. And there's a lot of trust in letting a group of students market an event. Now, I'm there. The marketing, the athletic director, marketing person is there. There are lots of people there to make sure that things don't go terribly wrong. But I think in terms of the higher level work and thinking about those specific professional development skills, this is best in a higher level undergraduate class or a graduate class. This could even be a graduate class activity. What do you all do for group work in 100 and 200 level classes? I don't teach 100 and 200 level classes. I don't get that opportunity.
I've found it's a 100 level class, but they're honor students, so they really are engaged. But to get them more comfortable talking pretty early on, I have them each, probably most of the time it's a group of 4. Okay, and so they are going to go to the other groups and share what their group is accomplishing and kind of what we're having trouble with and get feedback from them. Then they all go back so they're each a specialist on their project.
Okay.
And then they all go back and say, here's the suggestions we got from the other group.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, some of that intergroup work can be really helpful, I think, at all levels. But at that 100 level, that's really good. And that's a great idea because it also gets them comfortable giving each other feedback and suggestions. I mean, if any of you do peer review workshops on writing in class, I always tell my students when we do a peer review workshop on writing, I have no problem with you giving positive comments. That's good. But if I see all smiley faces on the paper, that's not really feedback. Okay? So the mix of the sandwich approach. This was good. What could you do better?
Where you have your quieter students, they can't default into that quiet mode. They have to go share with that other group as a specialist on their group. And then they have to bring stuff back. So one thing early on, because I do that fairly early on, they have to summarize the major concepts of their project. They have to be able to articulate it. And it just gets that buy-in instead of, I guess you don't want to say buy-in, but I have to know this because I know in 2 weeks I'm going to be going to the group, sharing what we're doing and gleaning feedback and also giving them feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah. And they're the experts. So they're not unprepared. Right. That's the thing, is you never want your students to be caught unprepared. You want to help them prepare and scaffolding their assignments and helping them become the experts in their areas. It's really important, too, for their confidence, especially in those lower level classes, I think. Other thoughts? Yes?
Good question. So I've been using discussion.
Yes.
So I've been using discussion pairs in lower division courses just for discussion purposes. So how would this work with if you, instead of a group, you had 2 people in a pair? Have you ever thought of that?
No, I haven't. I think you could certainly, groups of 2, in my experience, do tend to be pretty productive. It's when you start getting into that 4 or 5 that you really have to, because groups of 2, there's just more work for the 2 of them to do. But I think in terms of expectations, providing those expectations, providing those opportunities, and discussion pairs. So, Mark, when you do those discussion pairs, is it like a long-term assignment, or is it just in?
Like in class, and I rotate people throughout discussion pairs, and it works really well because I was using discussion groups, and you still have free writing. You have students kind of sitting there. But with 2, you have to listen to each other.
Right.
So it works really well. So I just wondered how it works.
Yes. Yeah, very awkward if a group of 2, one person isn't listening to the other. That's really awkward. That's a really good question. Does anybody else have thoughts on that? Or do you do discussion pairs or groups of 2? What are the strategies you might use to help facilitate some of that? Jerry? I think for our distance sites, they want to hear what you're saying. Yep.
A lot of times when I have 2, I require them to have equal time in their presentations as much as possible, and then they're always questioning how long should I speak. If there's 4 or 5, it usually breaks down to 3.5 to 4 minutes each, and they're like, well, that's a little strict, but that's about what it has turned out to be. So, and that's a lot of time, actually, 4 minutes. And then I have them do something kind of fun. You're right. If you just have them give their critique, it will almost always be smiley faces. But I have them not put their name on their critique. They write it on a piece of paper that I give it to them. And when the presentation is done, they drop it on their desk because they're usually sitting at the same table. And it's theirs to use as they wish. And they can toss them in the can if they want, or they can all read them. And it's amazing how much they read those. They actually read those. And I try to encourage them to use positive language, no curse words, no profanity. But they talk about their attire, about their demeanor, about the order they went in. And it's quite helpful. And I think that's a valuable piece is when they can all write what they think. Yeah.
And is that anonymous? Yeah, that's cool because students do value the feedback they get from other students. I mean, they value the feedback that their faculty members give, but even if you bring other faculty members into the class, they get really excited because they want to know what another faculty member might think. And when you make it more anonymous, students are more likely to give them some real constructive feedback that they're going to help. So that's a great idea.
To get them to feel comfortable.
Your meeting has ended.